edition of Talkin' Ball. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by Jerry Hamilton each and every Monday night. We try to take questions from folks, talk a little Longhorn football, a little Longhorn recruiting, and what ever else you guys want to talk about. Brought to you by our friend John Donovan over at Longhorn Wealth Management Group. Jerry, we heard Steve Sarkisian step to the mic today, talked a little bit about his team. And what he saw from it on Saturday against Florida, as well as a look ahead to Arkansas this weekend. We also listened to Sam Pittman, the Arkansas head coach, who was on an off week last week after getting really pantsed, I guess is the best way to put it, by Ole Miss the previous Saturday. But you know what? Ole Miss looks pretty good right now after beating Georgia this weekend. So we'll see what Arkansas has in store for the Longhorns within the week. Texas going to Arkansas in Fayetteville, 11 a.m. kickoff on Saturday. Jerry, you listened to Sam Pittman's press conference. I listened to on Steve Sarkisian's. Give people a sense for what you heard overall from Sam Pittman.
Yeah, so Talon Green practiced today. So he's expected to be good to go. He talked about that Malachi Singleton, the other quarterback, brings something as well, that he has confidence in both those guys. Jalen Braxton, I think, is practicing some this week. The sophomore defensive back from Frisco, who's a pretty good player for them. Jaquindon Jackson, he didn't sound as positive about Jaquindon Jackson as he did Talon Green, but I think he does expect him to go. Obviously, he talked about the meaning of this game for Jaquindon, not just that he was once a Texas signee, obviously, but being from Duncanville and the former teammates Cam Williams, Colin Simmons. There's a lot in that game. Talked about defense is secondary because obviously Ole Miss threw for record yards on them. LSU Nussmeier had a big game against them. He mentioned how defensive backs is pretty much open for competition at like 3 spots this week. And he was like, that's the way it should be. He said, when we have a couple of weeks like we did, our kids see the film and the number twos are say, hey, why can't we compete? And he said, so there's competition this week at multiple secondary spots. So that was one of his takeaways. He talked about the rivalry some. I think the interesting thing is that the rivalry is probably more for the fans than it is the players, since they don't play it much anymore. 2021, but how many of those players were actually on either team in 2021? He talked about the rivalry some and how he showed the 64 and parts of the 64 and 69 games to his team. But it was more about his team, what they need to get corrected in the secondary, health of quarterback, kind of expectations for his group. He gave Texas a lot of praise. He gave Sark a lot of praise. He said the national championship game, what was that? Was that against Georgia 2019? He said was the best called offensive game he's ever seen by an offensive coordinator who was Sark at the time. So he gave Sark a lot of credit. He said the Texas roster has changed a lot. He did mention NIL when asked specifically about Texas's rise and their roster construction. He mentioned NIL first, and then he went to Steve Sarkisian, knew what they needed to get to build this roster up and have done a great job doing it. He talked about, because somebody asked specifically about the Texas scheme and Sark, he said it's the speed that's the difference in the scheme now, and the players are better, but he said the speed is a big difference in where they're at now versus where they were. So very complimentary of Sark in the job he's done at Texas. We talked about how the 2021 game is not even really relevant this go round because Texas has really changed their program, and but again, the big nut, because we had a number of people asked this morning on Coffee and Football about Talon Green. Talon Green practice that he's expected to go.
Yeah, that's a big one. The quarterback transfer from Boise State. I really like Talon Green as more of a passer type, even though he can run, Jerry, and has some speed to him. Really, I love their backup. I thought he's moved the team extraordinarily well and when he's come in, both against Tennessee in that come from behind victory, and even against Ole Miss last week when they added some points to the board after the game had already gotten out of hand, obviously. But still, one of those things. As far as Steve Sarkisian is concerned, He was very complimentary of his team. Felt like the mojo returned on offense. That he said. Also talked a little bit about the health of his team and some of the team, how he's seen his team respond in this off week and how they challenged them to lead the country the last 4 games in turnovers. Said that is the number one stat in football that you can follow forever. Turnovers. Right now, he said Texas +2 in these final 4 games. Would have been +3 if not for that Jarrett Gibson fumble. By the way, one of the things that I thought was funny in the comment today in his press conference, he talked about Jarrett Gibson, the freshman running back, Jerry, going around the 40 acres today with a football tucked high and tight during class and other places all day long.
That made me think of like high school football for some reason. I don't know why. I saw that and I thought about high school football. It's something you'd see at a high school, a kid walking around the running back with the football for the points of pressure, walking around with the ball and during a class and during school.
Yeah, absolutely. We also want to talk a little recruiting today. Jerry, I actually put something out on Texas football this morning that said we kind of felt like there might be a commitment this week. I'm not going to go into who I believe that to be or who it is planned to be because, as I mentioned this morning, things can and do change. That's not abnormal in this business. But right now, what are you looking at from a recruiting perspective? Who all's on the board? That sort of thing. Texas hosted 2 official visitors over the weekend, both from the state of Florida in the Tampa area.
Yeah, so Grayson Littleton visited. Kellen Wiley, linebacker, visited. Both 4-star prospects for me. I think Grayson Littleton's a top 150 level kid in the country, the corner. Both of them had tremendous visits, as you would expect. I mean, they were at Texas for the Florida game. Unbelievable atmosphere, huge win, celebratory mood. At least 6, 7 other commitments were there. Those guys spent time with their families. The families spent time together. Recruits spent time. The visitors spent time with other recruits, Grayson Littleton, Jonah Williams, Kellen Wiley, Elijah Barnes, then as well as some players. David Benda, Maurice Blackwell were involved with Kellen Wiley's recruitment, and DBs were involved with Grayson Littleton's. I think Littleton's, I think Texas is trending over Michigan, but we'll see where it goes. Those are the 2 final schools, unless he adds a visit in there, which going into this week, he wasn't planning to when I was by the school a week ago today. Kellen Wiley's been a Miami lean for a while. Texas we'll see if Texas can overcome the closer to home Hurricanes where he visits November 23rd. He may make a visit to Maryland this weekend, but I really think Miami, Texas, and Florida are probably the 3 with Maryland and Penn State on the list. But I'd be surprised there. I think Miami and Texas may battle this one out for Kellen Wiley. I had a little bit of a Kevin Wynn update today. Texas is still trying to get Kevin Wynn on campus. That's really the next one. November 23rd, Kentucky game is what we're watching. And Kevin Wynn does not have a visit locked in right now for the 23rd as of lunchtime today. It's really seeing who are these guys they can get on campus on the 23rd. They're sitting at 22 commitments. I think Texas leads for Michael Terry. I think Javian Hilson's right there with Texas A&M battle. I think Texas feels good about it. I think A&M may feel good about it too a little bit. So we'll see there. But it's easy to see where Texas can get up to 27, 28 in this class. The key will be as it gets down to, they're going to have a top 5 class. They have a shot to have a top 3 class, which that's the highest Sark's had is the 23 class with Arch Manning. That was a number 3 ranked class. Texas has a shot at that as well. We'll see where it falls because, there's class rankings and filling needs. I think right now class ranking is looking really good for Texas. And they, like I said, they could get up to 26, 27, even 28 if they got a late flip from a really good player in there. But I think that's kind of the ceiling is the number 2, 3 class and 28 guys for it. But if you had 26 or 27, you're looking at number 3 class because everybody they're recruiting from here on out helps boost your class ranking. That's where this class is at. So I think it'll be interesting to see. Kevin Wynn, the interesting thing with him was I think Florida State, where he's committed, still has a chance. South Carolina, where he was there for the A&M game. They did a great job with the culinary program the whole way with Kevin Wynn. And in Texas, USC is trying to get him back out the campus on the 30th. We'll see on that. Georgia, I think, would be a compromise school. I don't think Georgia's high on his list. That doesn't mean it's not high on the list of some people in his circle. But I think that'd be more of a compromise school for him right now. And I mean, that's a great compromise, right? But I don't think that's a top 3 school for Kevin himself right now.
I'm looking at it, Jerry, and as you mentioned, 22 commitments for the Longhorns. Zealous Hicks, young man that reclassified from 26 to 25. You and I talked about it a little bit this morning on Coffee and Football. Is he still taking visits elsewhere? What's the latest on him? Him reclassifying seems to put maybe him in, I don't know, I wouldn't say harm's way, but some other teams have kind of focused in on him as a possible guy they're trying to peel off from the Longhorns commitment list.
Yeah, I mean, that's what, when the colleges realized that reclass could really happen, and we were reporting right after he committed, it was at least 50-50. We thought it was, behind the scenes like 80-20, but you got to wait till he announces it. But so Tennessee, some of those schools have tried to make a run at him. Georgia Tech here at the end, and he was at the Georgia Tech Miami game, I believe, Saturday. He was up at Tennessee the week before. Florida at LSU is a possibility, but you're into the playoffs now in Georgia. I mean, like, one other thing on Kevin Wynn, he can't go, and there's a lot of Saturday games because of the hurricane and kind of that bump back some scheduling things, so it kind of threw the whole schedule off. But like Kevin Wynn, last thing on Kevin Wynn, I failed to mention, he won't be at the Tennessee at Georgia game Saturday because he's got a game on Saturday. So if you have a game on Saturday, that could affect your visits. But Zealous Hicks scheduled to make his official visit to Texas November 23rd, 4th, which is a really good sign for the Horns.
All right. Before we get into y'all's questions, we're going to take those the rest of the night here. I have a couple things to announce. One, the young women of the University of Texas won the first ever SEC championship in soccer yesterday against the University of South Carolina. We had Ange Kelly, the coach of the Longhorns, on our program on Texas football earlier today. You guys can check that out. Since that has been published, the Lady Longhorns are now set for their first match of the NCAA tournament. They will be playing Boston U at Mike Myers Stadium on the University of Texas campus on Friday. If that is the round of 32, if they win that, then they play the winner of Michigan State, Western Michigan in the Sweet 16. Just so you know, Ange Kelly has taken 2 Texas teams to the Sweet 16 previously, but has not made it into the Elite 8. So this is her opportunity to do that. Longhorns get the home tie against Boston University, the Patriot League champions. Also want to say thank you before we get to the questions to our sponsor, John Donovan, President, Longhorn Wealth Management Group. John's a proud Texas Exes Life member whose wife and 6 siblings are also UT grads. This UT family passion is what led John to brand his firm, Longhorn Wealth Management Group. John wants to remind everyone that today is Veterans Day. Thank you all very much, by the way, all veterans out there. So please join us in thanking them for their tremendous service to our country. In that spirit of service, John also wants to offer all OTF fans a free 90-minute consultation to help you maximize your wealth, minimize your taxes, and secure your legacy. Call John and his team at Longhorn Wealth, 972-707-4900, or go online at longhornwealth.net to schedule your free consultation today. Again, John's been providing investment advice for more than 30 years, as well as retirement insurance and estate planning services. 972-707-4900 or longhornwealth.net.
I want to add one thing on women's soccer. We talked to Coach Kelly today, and for the chat, those of you who haven't looked at her bio, she played on one of the best college teams in any sport of all time. She is a 5-time, because one was a redshirt injured year, 5-time national champion. 5. The 4 years she was part of that team where she was playing and wasn't injured, 99-1.
99-1-1.
And Mia Hamm, obviously a good friend and teammate of her, but I mean, 5 national championship rings.
Yeah. Hey, let's that tournament happened down in Pensacola, Jerry. And Randy Bobandy has a question. Jerry, the Longhorns women's soccer team won the SEC championship here in Pensacola. has Texas ever recruited this area in football? I know one guy that they recruited, a young man named Trent Richardson, back in the day that ended up at Alabama, but he was on a visit to Texas at one point in time. I don't know if Texas has recruited others from there. Tallahassee's about the closest, where they got John Burt a few years back. But can you think of anybody in the panhandle of Florida, Jerry, that the Longhorns have had success with other than John Burt?
No, I mean, not really. There's a 2026 edge kid, but Texas hadn't really been on him yet. But if they do, I'll make sure to trip down there and go to Floribama and hang out and watch him. But no, I mean, not really. And I was thinking all sports. I mean, I haven't Pensacola JUCO in basketball. I can't think of anybody there. But in football, no, not that comes to mind. Like you said, John Burt in Tallahassee was the closest one. And yeah, we'll see. That'll eventually change because Pensacola has good kids. They have 2 or 3 really high-level kids in every class, and a couple of those guys are always underrated and have ended up in Mississippi State and gone on to be All-Americans. But I bet that question's answered with a yes in the next 4 or 5 classes.
I want to say this: best player ever from the city of Pensacola is in one of the best running backs of all time, and a Dallas Cowboy, Emmitt Smith, out of Escambia High School there in Pensacola. MJF, let's stay on that topic. In Florida running backs, how active is Jarrett Gibson as a recruiter, and how much does his early playing time as a freshman and 100-yard game against Florida help us recruit high school and portal players in Florida in the immediate future? Jerry, you mentioned this. It couldn't hurt for Texas to beat up on the Florida Gators this past weekend when it comes to Texas recruiting in the Sunshine State so much.
Yeah, I just don't. It can help, but I don't think it means what it used to because of NIL. These are so much individual recruitment. But I think that the main thing is just kids. The kids are enjoying their time. I mean, Cedric Baxter started as a freshman, right? Jarrett Gibson had a big game against Michigan, came back and got 100 yards against the team he was once committed to. Michael Kern's been a starting punter this year. So I think the Florida guys that Texas has gotten have all been playing and have had good experiences at Texas thus far. Obviously, Jordan Johnson-Rebell, that's a little different, right? Because he's a Fort Worth kid that went down the IMG. But I think that more than anything, and look, Myron Charles committed, Dia Bell committed. They're right there for Javion Hilson. Jamie French is an unbelievable personality, committed. So I just think, look, Texas being in the SEC, those kids having success at Texas, some level of success, right? I mean, Cedric Baxter's the one that was a starter as a freshman. But games change a little bit in recruiting. I'm not sure it factors in as much anymore, but it doesn't hurt. And I think Texas should recruit Florida more, by the way, the state more.
All right, here's one real quick. Braxton asking for tailgate. And what's the tailgate situation for the game? I'm not going to this game, guys. The first game this year I'm going to miss. I'm actually headed up to see my daughter this week, so I will be there, but I will be watching the game, obviously, on television. So I'm not going to the game. It's Fayetteville's an interesting place to tailgate, certainly one that you'll have plenty of options in the area as well as on site. There will be a lot of places in Fayetteville. It's kind of a neat little town for where it is located. Definitely a college town, in my opinion, Braxton. So all of those towns, in my opinion, pretty much good. The only town I would not suggest in the SEC, by the way, that I've been to is Starkville.
Yeah,
its name is very appropriate in using the term Stark. I'll just put it that way. All right. Steven Cavazos. Is there a reason why we don't see Manny Muhammad on any of the PFF Pro Football Focus top-graded SEC DBs? Right now, Jahdae Barron, the top-rated SEC defensive back, I believe, or at least cornerback there. I think that I don't know how PFF grades, Jerry, whether it's attempts against or what have you. But Manny Muhammad has been pretty darn good this season as a corner. Hard for me to believe that he wouldn't be rated one of the top DBs or top corners if given the opportunity. So you have any insight on that, or is that one of those things where we just don't know how Pro Football Focus is grading folks.
Yeah, I don't really have any idea on that. The one thing I'll say about Manny Muhammad, from my point of view, is Jahdae Barron's making big plays, a lot of them, and they still keep challenging him more than Manny Muhammad. That says a lot for Manny Muhammad, by the way, a lot.
Yes, it does. Let's stay there. Craig Johnson has a kind of a follow-on question to this. Why is the 2024 defense better than 2023? Our secondary is playing well as a unit, would be my guess. I think that's part of it, Craig. Better communication. I think that the edge play is much improved year over year and more versatile. Last year, you had Barron Sorrell and Ethan Burke, and that was pretty much it at edge. I mean, Justice Finkley played a little, but now you've got 4 or 5 guys that can go get after the passer a little bit, and I think that opens things up and makes the secondary better. I also would say this. I don't want to say this the wrong way, but I'm not so sure that Terrence Brooks and Jaron Thompson, in part because of their lack of all-out speed, might be addition by subtraction, the 2 people that took over their roles. And so that alone in the secondary can make your unit be a faster, better unit. I'm not trying to say anything negative about Terrence or Jaron. Jaron's starting for Auburn this year, I believe, and I think Terrence is playing at least some for Illinois. But I believe, I really believe that it's primarily the pass rush combined with increased speed in the secondary, as well as just a year older in the secondary too for most of those guys.
Yeah, and communication is much better. I think that this defense communicates at maybe the best level, on the same page and the best level in the country. The other thing, Sam Pittman, that brought me to something Sam Pittman said today. Somebody asked him, an Arkansas writer asked him about the difference between Ole Miss defense and Texas. And he said Ole Miss was more complex than Texas. I think Texas does what they do, right? And they do it really well, and they've tried to master that. And they don't blitz as much. They're more, and I don't want to say simplistic, but I don't know the term. That's kind of what Sam Pittman was talking about. More, he said they more just line up and here it is. That is one thing, but I think they communicate at a high level. Andrew Makuba was a huge addition. He's got 3 interceptions and missed a game at safety, right? And I think Jelani McDonald has given safety depth, because last year, if Derek Williams would have gone down, where would you have been? And Keaton Crawford, great player on special teams. He's missed on special teams. Safety didn't really have safety eyes, so it didn't matter how good of an athlete he was. Makuba's got safety eyes. I think Jelani McDonald is better at safety than Keaton Crawford, in my opinion. So they've drastically improved there. But I really think what's tied this thing together outside of communication and what Bobby mentioned was Jahdae Barron playing well at corner. I mean, I think that's really, because you knew Manny Muhammad was going to be really good. And then you said, okay, what's going to happen at the other corner? And when Jahdae answered that bell plus some, that really, I think, changed the whole Texas defense.
I did. They'll be challenged this week in the passing game, no doubt about it. Andrew Armstrong, a transfer from 2 years ago from West Texas A&M, that Texas actually liked a lot, but ended up going with Adonai Mitchell instead, as well as Isaac Satania, Mario Satania, the former Texas track and field coach.
Yeah.
His son is the number 2 receiver up at Arkansas right now, and he is a speedster that was originally committed actually to Texas A&M before switching to Arkansas. They've got a talented offensive skill position group, Jerry. Maybe the best Texas has faced this year from an offensive skill position standpoint. What do you think? Are they better than Carson Beck and Trevor Etienne and those guys?
Offensive line wise, too, with it. Skill guys.
That offensive line.
Yeah. Skill wise, I would say no. I still would say no. Just me. I think they're better than anybody else. Yes. But better than Georgia, I'll still say no on that. Georgia just hadn't played up to the level. But Georgia also kicked off 2 of their top 3 receivers, too. So, but I think Nate Frazier, Travis Etienne, really good. So maybe a push.
I said Trevor Etienne, didn't I? Yeah, sorry about that, guys. This one from MJF. Not knowing if said Baxter will be ready early next season, do you think we look in the portal for a running back? I know it's early, but who's on your wish list right now? A, to enter the portal, and B, to consider Texas. Well, I got news for you. Ashton Janty ain't going in. He's going to the league, guys. That would be my number one. I do think they need to go to the portal for a running back. Jerry, I've been on the record for this. I know that there's some thought that maybe they don't because they've got two midtermers coming in, and James Simon and Ricky Stewart. Where do you sit on this? Full on.
I could see trying to get a role player running back out of the portal, potentially not knowing if Cedric Baxter, he's going to be released and he's going to be back, but that's different than taking hits and being ready to play football. So where's he at? Same with Christian Clark. Achilles for a 215-pound back is a big deal. So neither one will be there for his spring. I could see taking a role player type of back. Anybody that's expecting Texas to go shoot for the stars, I'm not expecting that at running back. That's how you get guys bouncing out and transferring. I think Texas has good players there. A lot will be also happen. What does Jaden Blue do? I mean, I think the thought is, he's going pro, but I mean, what's his stock? It's a great running back draft. What's your stock? Are you fine being a 6th-round pick or undrafted free agent if it doesn't fall your way, even though you're really fast? Because I'm here to tell you there's a ton of really good backs going in the draft this year. So, and those guys get pushed down the draft anyways every year. So, it could be dependent on what Jaden Blue does as well there. But in the spring, I can see the argument. I can see the discussion for it for sure because Baxter and Clark aren't going to be there in the spring. If Jaden Blue goes pro or attempts to go pro, then you're sitting there with Jarrett Gibson and Trey Wisner and James Simon and Ricky Stewart for spring practice, not knowing where Cedric Baxter and Christian Clark are truly going to be headed next year in August.
I've got a question coming up, and I want to try to get to this. It's a super chat from Mike Gosnell. Thank you, Mike, for your super chat. Building off the where Texas has recruited discussion, as a Northeast U.S. resident, has Texas ever had success in football or men's basketball recruiting PA, New York, Maryland, et cetera? So let's take basketball out of it because the answer unquestionably in that area is yes. There's this little guy named Kevin Durant. Terrence Richer, Royal
Ivy, James Thomas. I mean, hoops. PJ Tucker's North Carolina.
Yeah, take men's basketball out of it because the answer there is unquestionably yes. Football is a different story. Obviously, Sadir Mitchell's from New Jersey. Chris Sims from New Jersey as well. But I go back 30 years covering the Longhorns, and I can't recall a New York or Pennsylvania player or Massachusetts that signed with the Longhorns. Now, I will say this. I know this because he was a former Texas resident, and then he went up to a prep school up in, I believe it was Massachusetts. Is a guy named Bob Moses was on the University of Texas and Darrell Royal's first recruiting class at the University of Texas way back in the day. But that's more of a prep school guy. Congrats. I mean, Bob's still one of the best Longhorns of all time. Just a really good guy living down in Houston that I met a couple times. But I would say this, my thought on Texas recruiting up there. I know of New Jersey. Jerry, I don't know of DC, Lavelle Pinckney.
Yeah, I was going to go there.
Yeah. Other than that, I can't. Eric Metcalf was from the DC. He was from Arlington, Virginia as well. That's a big one. But other than that, I can't think.
The only other one that's interesting on the Texas roster now is Connor Robertson. Even though his father went to Texas, his father was working up in New York City, and so he was at a prep school high school, private school up in Connecticut before they moved back to Westlake. But he's really the only guy that comes to mind recently.
All right, fair enough.
But as far as recruiting on the East Coast, it just comes down to, I call it boots on the ground, which is time. I mean, how much time, how much can you really put there? Because you need to spend a lot of time in Florida and Georgia and you're going to spot recruit in Alabama and Mississippi, ample time in Louisiana. Sark's always going to recruit the West Coast. Even Johnny Nansen is working Las Vegas and up in Salt Lake City a little bit more now than anybody ever has at Texas. So it's almost like you're stretched thin from a time perspective because you don't have as many days anymore on the road. So the calendars change. So it's tough. And the tough thing about it, even though you're a national brand in the SEC in that region, is if you go into Virginia and you go into 7-5-7 and you go battle, I mean, you would have to have some ties there or have a kid that just really likes you because, I mean, Penn State, Ohio State, those people rule in recruiting in those schools. I mean, so you have to have, there has to be a real legitimate shot. I don't think Texas is going to go in there and hit 15 schools and spend a week in the state of Virginia and DC recruiting. I don't think it'll work that way, but I think they could spot recruit 2 or 3 or 4 kids every now and again.
All right, let's keep going here, if you don't mind. We got one from Bobby Betronic. Generally speaking, most passing attacks are hitting us between the numbers, and more specifically, between that hashes, because teams rarely try to attack Barron or Manny, except in the quick game. I have a question. Is that because we haven't played many good quarterbacks, though, too? Is that part of it as well, that they don't really have the arm or the wherewithal to attempt to go outside? I mean, Mississippi State did go outside and have a little bit of luck. With some, they had true speed at receiver too, by the way, even though they were younger. What do you think, Jerry? You agree with that statement and overall perception?
Yeah, I do, and I think it's kind of what everybody's point is on this. I think it's kind of a factor of all of it. The quarterbacks for sure. Texas hasn't played the dynamic offenses that really can hit you everywhere all the time. How many of them are there is the reality, and how many of those quarterbacks are there. So I think that's part of it. I do think, look, I will say this. Manny Muhammad has challenged as little as any cornerback I remember at Texas in a while. And there's a reason for that. People see how just talented he is and how attached he is. So that is a factor. That is definitely part of it for me, is that just how good of a technician Manny Muhammad actually is. I think people are working away from him. And also sometimes look, if you're playing safeties deep and you have good corners, well, you're going to try to attack over the middle behind the linebackers. I mean, that's just natural, right?
You would think so. All right. Keep going here. This one from Kenneth Cassidy. Bobby and Jerry, what can you tell us about the D-line of Arkansas compared to Florida? They like to play a lot of 3-man fronts, first of all. That's my opinion. So that's one big difference. I do think that Florida plays a bigger defensive front. Arkansas actually likes to play a lot of 3 deep, which means it's more of a 3-3-5 look for them. So we'll have to see what that exactly means. One player in particular that I'll be looking for is Landon Jackson, the defensive end, who is Lance Jackson's older brother. We met him, Jerry, at the SEC Media Days, and I became an instant fan, by the way, of Landon Jackson. Really nice young man, good guy. But Arkansas D-line, not as highly recruited as a Florida defensive line for sure, right?
Yeah, so I would say outside Landon Jackson, they're very similar to Florida. They're frontline guys where they're not like elite pass rushers, right? I mean, that's not what they have. Landon Jackson is their guy. So that was similar to Florida. So there's some similarities there size-wise, talent-wise. Florida has more of those guys, has a deeper rotation. But if you handle Landon Jackson, I'm not sure how much pass rush they can get without playing a lot of games, bringing a lot of numbers. I think they're going to have to bring numbers. Sam Pittman came out and said that in the press conference today, by the way. So that's what I would say. Florida's got better depth on the defensive line. Landon Jackson's a better player on the defensive line than anybody Florida had, but I think Florida's got better depth and maybe better rotation on the interior. Fair enough.
All right. Let's see this. Briss. Bobby, Jerry, how sure are you guys that the Horns will finish 3-0 and control their destiny? I'm not. I'm, so if you ask me how sure, I'm not sure at all. I do know that the Horns control their own destiny if they go 1-0 each of the next 3 weeks. I think that's how we have to look at this. Every game, go into it and go from there. My question right now is, can the Horns afford to lose a game and still make the playoffs in these final 3? It's pretty clear that 4 2-loss SEC teams are likely to go to the college football playoffs.
I hate to throw this scenario out, but I think a loss to Arkansas or Kentucky would be bad for Texas. If there's 4 10-2s going for 3 spots, I'm not sure that would be a good scenario. If you beat Kansas, if you beat Arkansas, you beat Kentucky. If you lose in a nail biter in A&M and it's a wild atmosphere and A&M's playing really good football, assuming they don't stub their toe, then I think that improves Texas' chances if they take another loss. But I don't think a loss to Arkansas or Kentucky would necessarily be good for Texas if it comes down to, here's 4 teams, here's your resumes, and only 3 are getting in. I think it gets a little dicey at that point which way the committee goes. But I do think a 10-2 Texas at the end of the day gets in, but I'm just saying there would be discussions to be had at that point.
All right. I want to say thank you one more time to our sponsor of the Talkin Ball on Texas football live stream on Monday nights. Thank you to John Donovan, President, Longhorn Wealth Management Group. As a proud UT alum, John has served 15 years as a Dallas, Texas Exes board member and is now helping lead the build-out of the Collin County Texas Exes chapter up in the Dallas area. John wants to wish all our veterans and their families a blessed Veterans Day and thank them all for their service to our country. John is also offering all On Texas Football fans a free 90-minute private consultation to evaluate how John can help you identify your needs and objectives, as well as meet your financial dreams. Call John and the Longhorn Wealth team at 972-707-4900 or go online, www.longhornwealth.net, to schedule your free private consultation today. That's www.longhornwealth.net, 972-707-4900. Jerry, we got more questions coming here that we need to get to. This one from Aloha Traveler. Texas absolutely needs to go to the portal for a starting RB, a few O-line, TE, and wide receiver. You can't roll into Columbus, Ohio with a green O-line and iffy RB depth. Man, there's some truth to that. You and I are on the same page. Like I've been telling Jerry for a couple of weeks, I think they need to go for one offensive lineman that's got some starting juice. Jerry will say that's not what Kyle Flood likes to do.
I mean, you hear Sark today just commenting on Trevor Gooseby is going to be really good. I don't see it. I don't see it on the offensive line. Tight end, I don't see that either. Well, the only thing there would be if like Nyblack transferred somewhere else, right? And that opened up something. I'm not saying that's happening. What was the other position there?
Tight end, O-line, wide receiver, and
wide receiver. I think they'll add a speed guy. I think they'll add a speed merchant at wide receiver because Khalil Lockett's a tremendous X. Obviously, these guys are going to be freshmen. They're all midterm enrollees. Dalen McCutcheon will fall into that DeAndre Moore position role. Jamie French is more that guy that can play outside, can play inside, can move around a little bit. But what will they add to that? I think the fourth guy and what they looked at in the high school class, but they haven't really pushed on anybody this season, is that speed guy. And now I think through the portal, experienced speed guy. I think that's what they'll add up wide.
I agree with you. They're going to be looking for someone to replace what Isaiah Bond brings.
Yeah.
Because I think Ryan Wingo, when I was listening to Sark talk today, Jerry, he mentioned the speed of 3 guys at receiver he thought were special. Bolden, Bond, and Ryan Wingo. It's likely only one of those 3 returns next year in Ryan Wingo. So they definitely need another speed guy that has some experience. I agree with you on that. All right.
That's somebody in the chat saying Ryan Williams from Bama will be a Longhorn next year. Why would he leave Alabama?
Money. I have no clue. I'm just
Dude, that guy.
I wouldn't be leaving Alabama, I don't think.
I will give this guy that predicts it ultimate credit. I'm remembering who said it on 7:55 p.m. at November 11th. I don't think that's happening though, but I will give you credit, dude, if it happens.
Longhorn Nation will thank you if it happens. Justin Yarbrough, any update on Colton Vasek? One of the coolest things I've seen at the game Saturday was seeing Baxter in his jersey in the huddle. Haven't got to see that from the television set. That's neat, Justin, that you mentioned that. By the way, any update on Colton Vasek? Jerry, I don't have anything. We'll see what happens on the Wednesday report. I'm hopeful Colton Vasek gets back because he was providing some time. Justin, if we have anything, we will absolutely pass it on to you. What about this one, Jerry? Because this came out today. Former Texas commitment, thank you, Juan, for the super chat. Former Texas commitment running back Racine Guillory out of Aledo has decided to reclassify to the class of 2025. Would Texas take 3 running backs in this recruiting class?
No, that ship sailed.
Okay. All right. All right. Next one. Jerry, you're going to have to explain yourself here. Hey, Jerry, what was that tweet concerning the Missouri recruit? Give people the full context right now so you can at least explain yourself and what this means.
There was just somebody committed to Missouri that was trying to recruit somebody committed to Texas to flip to A&M. And it's not happening, obviously, but it was just it's what happens in recruiting.
Well, it sounds like the Missouri recruit may be flipping to A&M, though.
100%. Unless something drastically changes.
There you go. All right, we got time for a couple more questions till we go to the top of the hour here. Chris Robbins, Jerry, where do you see Quinn getting drafted?
Great question. I think A&M's a big game for him, and hopefully the playoffs after that.
Maybe Arkansas too.
Yeah, I mean, I think. Look, it's a tough one. It's a tough now. Quinn, once you get through the season and you get into workouts, is going to look tremendous. Okay, Bobby, you were at his pro day last year. You're going to look tremendous. What's the lasting impression with NFL scouts from the Georgia game? How does that affect him? And that's my question with him. The reality of that situation was a third-year starting quarterback in the arguably the second biggest game he's ever played. Steve Sarkisian had to pull him from the game. How much of a lasting impression is that going to be with NFL personnel? I mean, if you think back, and we're just being real, I hope Quinn's a first rounder. I hope it happens for Texas. I hope it happens for Quinn. Quinn has done great things to help Texas turn this thing around. But I'm answering the question the best I can. I don't know how much weight that's really going to how is that going to affect some decision makers? I've thought back about this, and I can't recall a third-year starting quarterback that got pulled in a game like that before for play, not injury. That's
a $1 million question, right? Was he also somewhat injured coming back? I'm looking at it this way. Arkansas is just as important a game as maybe A&M in some respects, Jerry. And here's why. Jackson Dart could be part of this draft class, right?
Oh, yeah, I think he's very good.
Oh, okay, so how Quinn does compared to Dart versus the same secondary 2 weeks later. Garrett Nussmeier could come out if he wanted to. How does Quinn Ewers compare to Garrett Nussmeier? Brady Cook likely to take on the Razorbacks in a couple weeks. The Missouri quarterback, he could come out. Same question. How does he compare? How does Quinn compare to him? So I think while people might say Georgia could be the barometer, so to speak, well, they could say, but he was injured against Georgia.
Yeah.
You can't really say that against Arkansas now, a month or more later.
That I think the reason I think it's going to be A&M for him is big, or a playoffs is A&M has 6 guys that are on NFL draft boards on defensive line. Scourton's looked at as a first rounder. Shamar Turner, a second, third. Shamar Stewart's probably in that same boat. They're going to get after Quinn, and I think if he has a good game under duress against A&M, that would help alleviate what happened against Oklahoma and Georgia for scouts, in my opinion. But we'll see. I could be wrong. I just don't know how much of a lasting impression that Georgia game is going to make, because to me, the problem with that game for him in the draft is that's every week in the NFL. That's a couple of weeks in college. That's every week in the NFL. But again, once it gets to pro days, he's going to look tremendous. And so there's different pieces to it. Quarterbacks get pushed up the draft. I don't think, me personally, I don't think Quinn or Carson Beck has played to a first-round level this year.
No, Carson Beck certainly hasn't.
I don't think. I don't
know if he's played the second-round level or third.
But that doesn't mean both won't go in the first either. That's what's crazy about the draft of quarterbacks.
Yeah. All right. Hey, I got the time for one more question. I do want to answer this one real quick first before we get to the final one. Since quarters and semis, and this is from Derek, are now bowl games, will teams still be expected to go through the normal bowl week activities, or will those be reduced to 1 to 2 days before the bowl so teams can prepare at home? Derek, great question. I don't know the answer yet. That would be my comment right now. I don't know that answer. We'll get more clarity on that most likely later. My thought would be that they would not. Let's finish with this one tonight from Michael Simpson. Should Jarrett Gibson be getting heavier reps in the first half after this Saturday? Just seems like he's a more traditional back than Wisner or Blue and gives you something that they don't. He definitely gives you a short yardage back. Look, they used him in the first quarter in short yardage.
Yeah.
Clark pulled him off the bench, hadn't seen a snap all day. And when it goes to 4th and 1, he brings in Jarrett Gibson. He definitely gives you something different, Jerry. I mean, should he be getting heavier reps in the first half after this Saturday?
I think it just depends on how the game goes. I mean, and what Arkansas is doing defensively, and how Texas is doing with their perimeter passing and outside zone and wide zone run game. But I think it's possible, right? I think the interesting thing there is the way Sark is using Jarrett Gibson as a fullback, essentially, and a fullback dive. Who would have thought that one preseason, that you'd be running fullback dive with Jarrett Gibson? Probably nobody. But I think that's going to depend on how the Arkansas game kind of goes and where Texas could have success against Arkansas. I think the one thing I love that Sark's done is he hasn't tried. They haven't banged their head against the wall, running inside zone no matter what. With this group of backs, and if Jarrett was way ahead of where the game was in like pass pro and ball protection, like Cedric Baxter was, maybe that changes. But Cedric Baxter was pretty rare for a freshman that had the whole playbook and pass pro, and you could trust him like every down of every game. That's just very rare. But I think what Sark's done is the perimeter game, passing game's extension of the run game. Then they've run outside zone. They've run wide zone. They've run some counter stuff off of it. But I thought they've used what they have to maximize it the best they can. Now, I think Jarrett could give them something valuable as this last part of the season. But I think it's going to really come down to how Arkansas defends what Texas is doing right now.
All right. That's going to do it for tonight. Thank you, Jerry Hamilton. Thanks to all of you guys, including those that sent those super chats in. We appreciate it. Appreciate Matt, our producer behind the scenes, as well as John Donovan of Longhorn Wealth Management, the sponsor, for helping us make this happen. Guys, if you have questions, we'll return tomorrow morning for the edition of On Texas Football, Coffee and Football. Then I've got lunch with the coaches, Bob Shipley and Brian Irwin, later tomorrow morning. And then we also have a couple of other episodes coming up, including the recruiting breakdown, where Jerry and CJ go over the very latest in recruiting news. For Jerry Hamilton, I'm Bobby Burton. Thanks again for watching On Texas Football. Welcome.